The special meeting of the Annapolis City Council for Monday, March 14th will be called to order at 7:03 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Littman, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panelides.
Present.
Alderman Budge.
Here.
Alderman Cleone.
Present.
Alderwoman Taylor Charles.
Present.
Alderman Falacy.
Present.
Alderman Littman.
Present.
Alderman Kirby.
Present.
Alderman Pfeiffer. Alderman Arnett.
Present.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the first item on the agenda?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. The first item on the agenda is the State of the City Address.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks to all of you in the audience for attending tonight's State of the City Address. I would also like to thank my colleagues on the Council for their dedication and hard work to the challenges that this city faces. It's a difficult job, and I couldn't do it alone. When the voters elected me more than 2 years ago, they demanded fiscal responsibility. I'm proud to stand here before you tonight saying that we've passed 2 budgets without raising the property tax rate. In this year's budget, we're going to introduce a third as well. We've reduced the solid waste fees 15% in both years, and I'm proposing another 5% reduction in this year's budget as well, totaling a 35% reduction in all the citizens' solid waste fees. Let me take a moment to highlight some of the progress we've made over the past 2 years. We've opened or expanded 236 businesses, which is key to economic development and creating jobs, which is one of the top priorities of my administration. We've closed the landfill, the old Annapolis landfill, to a revenue generator and a job creator. We anticipate that the 9,000 solar panels on this farm will bring in $5 million to the city over the next 20 years. We've hired 11 new police officers, which, as we've seen in recent times, is a difficult job to do, and we appreciate those who stepped up to the plate and recognized the challenge. And if there's any officers here, I'd say we take a moment to recognize them and give them a round of applause. Thank you. We filled 4,109 potholes since I've come into office, and we installed 54 bus shelters that have been taken down during the previous administration, so people waiting on our transit system now don't have to stand in the rain or the snow. We've held HACA accountable for the treatments of its residents, and we're demanding more accountability and responsibility. The 2 men I've nominated to the HACA Board of Commissioners, Mr. Dordan and Mr. Flynn, are men of integrity, and I believe that having them on the board will help set the ship in the new direction. We've made the permitting process easier. Now, if you have a permit that's less than $500, you don't have to come down to City Hall. You can simply do it on your own, which frees up city time and frees up the public's time as well. We've right-sized economic development, sharing resources with the county and creating an economic development manager which represents Annapolis. More recently, we helped breathe life into a new building downtown, the former Fawcett's building, with the passage of the waterfront maritime legislation. And that's going to benefit all the buildings in that district. We've accomplished a lot, and as mayor, all of our employees, our city manager and department heads, help me and do this work. I'm one man out of many, and I just want to pause, say thank you, and hope everyone can give them a round of applause for the hard work they've done. Every year since I've become mayor, I've had to make very difficult decisions with regard to the budget, and this year is no different. Tough decisions will need to be made, and I will do what it needs to be done to keep Annapolis on solid financial footings. Last year, my administration implemented a priority program budgeting process, which defines the budget in terms of what programs they provide. This is the 21st century way to do it. It's a standard that's been recognized by the International City Managers Association and many others. We've got away from the old days of just putting everything on a big spreadsheet. And I'm also pleased to announce that over the next several months, my staff, along with many people on the council, will be hosting town hall meetings on our budget. We have a new piece of software that will allow people to change the budget back and forth so they can see how it's done. All the things we do up here, we do for the people. We work for you and we value your input. So I look forward to meeting with many people over the next several months and hearing what their priorities are. As the budget process, I proposed a reorganization of the city structure and an effort to improve the efficiency of services we provide to our residents. There are several benefits associated with reorganizing city offices and departments. It makes the authority and accountability more direct and transparent. It creates a more understandable and open government for the public to understand. We're streamlining the permitting process. We're reducing cost, and we're creating more efficient ways to deliver services. As a city, we need to make the city more efficient and effective, and we will do that through the steps I've outlined through our reorganization and realignment. We need to promote Annapolis as a business-friendly city that makes economic development a priority. We need to continue to make Annapolis a place that people want to visit. And we need to facilitate new initiatives that we've already started on with the county, benefiting both citizens and government. And most importantly, we need to do more to protect our environment for future generations. So let me break down how I plan to implement each of these priorities as I move into my third year as your mayor. We need to promote Annapolis as a business-friendly city that makes economic development a priority and enhances our economic viability. We're launching an economic development strategic plan, which contains a roadmap for Annapolis over the next 5 years. It reflects the result of a process that involved hundreds of hours of research, including input from 80-plus organizational leaders and business owners. We embarked on this task getting the input from the citizens and business owners. This roadmap will put in place the business-friendly culture and framework to create more jobs and revenue for our city. We need to continue to showcase our city as a place Annapolis people want to visit. Annapolis is known as an historic city and applauded for our maritime industry. It's a place where you can kayak, sail, powerboat. It's basically a museum without walls. Annapolis is known for its educational institutions, both the United States Naval Academy and St. John's University. People come here to fish, go crabbing, experience the shops and what we have to offer, hosting more than 4 million visitors annually. Finding a place to park quickly and effectively has been a challenge for the city in the past. That's why I recently signed a 10-year contract with the firm to comprehensively manage all aspects of parking in the city of Annapolis, benefiting the city residents, the businesses, and the visitors. You will be able to pay for parking by your phone and find out how many spots are available in each garage in real time, and with one click of the phone or a mobile device. We need to facilitate new initiatives with the county, benefiting both the citizens and government. Some of the recent initiatives the county executive I have worked on include the following. Transportation. County Executive Steve Shue and I worked on a regional transportation effort between the city of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, where the county increased its funding to Annapolis Transit by $250,000, or 180%, so we can have better services between the two. This additional money will help us continue to provide a quality transit service in the capital city, Utilities. The city and county agreed on a utility easement which will allow for more favorable and less costly alignment of water and sewer systems. The county executive, Steve Shue, and I have broken down the barriers that used to exist between the city and county. One had their area, the other had the other. We're working together to benefit everybody. We're also working on an adequate public facilities work group. And before I go into it, I want to start and thank the members of the council who have agreed to serve on that. I know it's a very difficult task to embark on, and I value your input and all the work you've done on that. Overcrowding of schools has been a major challenge in the past, and this work group, bringing together people from the superintendent's office, the county office, city council member, and county council members, is a collaborative approach which I think will finally be able to have a law in the book that benefits everyone in Annapolis. And we are increasing our coordination and participation with emergency management. This is a great example of what the city's done to help. Earlier, we teamed up with the Anne Arundel County Health Department and other medical partners to conduct Anne Arundel County's Department of Health the first drive-through flu clinic, which was a way to inoculate over 1,000 residents in our city. This exercise tested the city's pandemic response plan, specifically the ability to mass inoculate in the case of an emergency. We've also done other things as well. We've done active shooter drills, we've done hurricane preparedness, tornado planning, hurricane recovery, and winter storm preparation. You can rest assured that if an issue comes up, the city's ready to respond. I want to personally thank County Executive Steve Shue and his staff and the County Council for their ongoing support as we continue on the partnerships we've built. We still need to do more to protect our environment for future generations. I remain committed to seeking funding from both the federal and state agencies to ensure the city is prepared for the next Hurricane Sandy or Isabel. Money for flood mitigation was a #1 request in 2015, and it was our #1 request this year as well. And I want to thank Governor Larry Hogan for providing $1 million to the city of Annapolis to help us fight off the flooding downtown, which helps our businesses, our residents, and everyone else. Meanwhile, we're developing a watershed improvement plan, which will be the city's roadmap to be compliant with the Clean Water Act and the Chesapeake Bay's Blueprint Reduction Program. The plan will identify a list of critical projects in the Annapolis watershed. It will improve water quality, reduce stormwater runoff, help prevent flooding, improve the overall health of natural resources in the city, and consider future funding sources for watershed improvements. The specific goals of the implementation plan is to achieve by 2025 a reduction in phosphorus and nitrogen levels of 25% each. Also in the next several weeks, the city will be planning a living shoreline at the Annapolis Maritime Museum. We will be expanding our lease with the Annapolis Maritime Museum, including the Ellen Moyer Nature Park at Back Creek, the Stormwater Environmental Education Center, bringing more opportunities for stormwater, environmental education, and outreach in our community. As we look to a positive fiscal change in our future, we need to look back and remember how the past actions of a previous administration are holding us back and accountable for their decisions. Days before I became mayor, the previous administration had passed a union contract that handcuffed me for the next 4 years. Decisions were made that put a burden on the budget as revenues were not keeping up with expenditures. I stand here today to tell you that this budget is a very lean budget, but one that will keep the city on solid financial footing. This budget was not only strapped with the limitations from the past, but we had to include step increases provided in the employee payment plan, address a 2% increase in our police and fire pension contribution, and accommodate a 9% increase in our health care costs. In this budget, I am proposing service reductions along with deferring routine maintenance for vehicle replacement. I am also recommending that we renegotiate contractual positions and leave vacant positions unfilled. When talking with residents, they express their strong feeling about making sure that their sidewalks are safe. So I am proposing that we continue to fully fund the sidewalk program revolving fund for next year 2017 and beyond. There were some increases in dollars coming into our city, that helped us defray more serious cuts. We received an additional $360,000 from the state of Maryland for highway user revenue. We received an $800,000 increase from the real estate taxes due to our growth and higher assessment. And Annapolis Transit benefited from $250,000 from County Executive Steve Shue. And we are continuing every day to identify and secure additional state and federal funding. I was elected to be your fiscal steward, and this budget is flat, lean, no-nonsense budget. I stand before you tonight and introduce to you my $102.8 million operating budget and my 2-year, $8.6 million capital spending plan. The budget funds priorities, and these include road resurfacing, roof repairs to the Tyler Avenue Fire Station, updating the women's locker facility at the Eastport Fire Station, replacing outdated police and fire radios, re-bricking Main Street, and an energy efficiency assessment which will save the city millions of dollars over the next several years. While I am proud of what we have accomplished, both in the operating budget and in the capital budget, I look forward with great anticipation to watching the last board on the boardwalk go into place, ending the city bulkhead project, going out to the Annapolis Renewable Energy Park to see the 9,000 solar panels that will be built there, standing on the shore of the Annapolis Maritime Museum as we help to improve our environment through that restoration project. And I look forward to being at the grand opening of new businesses in our cities as part of their celebration. This is a great city, and I'm not wavering in my promise to put Annapolitans first. My proposed budget makes your government efficient and effective, promotes Annapolis as a business-friendly city where people can help create jobs, does not raise the real estate tax, builds on a strong partnership with the county, and protects our environment for future generations. Part of what makes me a better mayor is input from residents. The first Tuesday of every month, I hold an open door session. And I've held 27 open door sessions since I've been mayor, listening to your views, concerns, and opinions. This is what makes me better and what makes our city a stronger place. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve as your mayor, and I thank you all for being here tonight. God bless you. Madam Secretary, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Please.
Pursuant to City Code 2.16.190B, I move to amend the agenda to include referrals of CA 116 and O 1216 to the Environmental Matters Committee.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the consent agenda, we have, I think, some, not yet, okay, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, you had a motion to amend the agenda, which was moved, seconded, and approved. So you are still looking at the primary question of the actual approval of the agenda as amended.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Point of information, please. Since this is the first time we're doing the consent agenda, I think we need just a little bit of explanation. If we approve the agenda, does that mean we have approved the consent agenda and therefore all of those?
No, it does not. There
All
will
right.
be a separate item for the consent agenda.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us when that's going to occur so that we can anticipate the,
It is after comments by the general public. Alderman Kirby.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is it possible for the city clerk to let us know what has been removed from the consent calendar? What pieces of legislation? I want to make sure R-09-16 has been removed. Thank you. I'm fine.
We will be there very shortly, I promise.
Okay.
Mr. City Attorney, could you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ID-80-16, the Martha Wood Leadership Award to the Food Link Incorporated.
If I could have the representatives join me at the center table. We have a City Side Council citation for Food Link, Inc. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you the City Council citation in recognition of being the 61st recipient of the prestigious Martha Wood Leadership Award. We acknowledge that your nonprofit organization serves the residents of Anne Arundel County and has made them a priority for the past 25 years. We recognize that Food Link for being instrumental in the distribution of food for those in need and delivering more than 27 million pounds of food of life-supporting aid through your 150-plus volunteers. For many years, Food Link has been a vital community partner of the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, and we applaud your organization for providing residents with clothing and furnishing for infant care, as well as your overall focus to foster community health. For your consistent and successful efforts in serving the residents of the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, we applaud your determination and honor you tonight, given under our hand in the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis on this 14th day of March, 2016. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful award. We are absolutely honored and humbled by the spirit at the heart of it. Martha Wood, a woman who wanted to make a difference in her community. That resonates with us because we've been serving our community for 25 years. Our mission is to provide vital daily life-sustaining essentials to our neighbors who are struggling. We try to be the light when they're seeing some of their darkest moments, when they can't put food on the table, formula in a baby's bottle, can't afford medication, are looking at eviction or utility cutoff. Every service we provide is done absolutely free of charge. I want to share this wonderful award with staff and board and family members and friends and supporters. And I want you to know that we intend to continue our caring and compassionate work here in the community, hoping that we will help reinforce your belief and support in us and receiving this award. Thank you very much.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with reports by committees.
Is there any alderperson that would like to present a report? Alderman Littman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Environmental Matters Committee met a few weeks ago, and we had a lot to discuss, and we got through a lot. I'll quickly go through some of the legislation that we discussed. The committee voted in favor unanimously about 0216, amending the composition of the Maritime Advisory Board. Also, for the lease of city property, spring 2017, 2018, and 2019 boat shows. We considered 01016 water service billing. The committee had a number of questions for the Department of Finance that they were not prepared to answer 'cause they weren't given questions in advance. So we are going to pick up that legislation again this coming Thursday at a regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday at 1:30. We also discussed 0316, the Stevens lease, and essentially we were told by the city attorney's office that council has no room to do anything other than approve the lease. So that is our understanding, and that was the genesis of why the committee voted to approve it. The committee did consider and ask questions about the environmental status of the land. This is about a 2,600 square foot area of land beneath the Stevens building. Because it is a land issue, I thought the Environmental Matters Committee should have the opportunity to ask, and we did have that opportunity to ask about the environmental condition, and there was no environmental concerns about that property. For topics, we laid out our agenda for the rest of the year in broad terms, not of course the complete agenda, but topics that we will try to cover over the next 10 months. We also went over the stormwater fund use, and I'll pause here for a second to make sure the council realizes the status that we're in. Most of the stormwater fund use is currently being used to pay for staff salaries. The other portion that fund has been used this year is water quantity, essentially water flow issues at City Dock. Very little of that money has been spent on water quality as opposed to quantity. The two departments, Neighborhood Environmental Programs and Department of Public Works, have been both working on developing a list of projects that are in need of dire attention, and I believe that fund is in dire need of more funding, frankly, to get these projects done. Some of that staffing shift happened last year as a result of the change to programmatic budgeting, where anyone doing anything touching stormwater got allocated from the stormwater fund. So I'm not suggesting that's improper by any stretch. What I'm suggesting is most people think of a stormwater fund as doing projects, and what I'm saying is that's not happening. We also got an update on Forest Conservation Act projects. This is not the legislation itself, but rather projects that fall under the Act. And just a reminder that there are numerous, 12, 13 or so various projects ranging in size from a couple acres to, of course, 111 acres. So there is a lot of development in a pipeline, and anyone interested about specifics, I urge you to go to the Environmental Matters agenda and click on the FCA updates. The Department of Neighborhood Environmental Programs has been very helpful in keeping us apprised of updates, and they're all detailed in that agenda. We have another meeting, like I said, this coming Thursday. It is not as packed of an agenda, but we do have a number of issues to take up, including the Stevens lease, excuse me. We also have a general discussion from Public Works on yard waste program, recycling for multifamily and businesses, compost recycling, and we're also going to get another FCA project update and a monthly report from the Annapolis Environmental Commission. So the Environmental Matters Committee has been quite busy the past month or so.
Thank you. Alderman Kirby?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that the Housing and Human Welfare Committee will meet tomorrow night at 7:30. We'll take up the recent appointments to the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners and chambers here.
Thank you. Alderman Pan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Economic Matters Committee will meet on Wednesday at 6:30, immediately following the Public Safety Commission meeting, which starts at 5. We have a rather limited agenda, but I certainly invite the public to attend. We will be talking about pending legislation and appointments. Thank you.
Alderman Budge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Transportation Committee hasn't met since the last council meeting, but we are meeting tomorrow night, 6:30 in these chambers, and we'll be talking about the network transportation services fee, the establishment of Shively Park, and the recently signed parking contract, and digging into that a little deeper. I'd also like to mention that the city's newest committee, the working group for the Historic District legislation, will be meeting Wednesday the 16th at the Pitt Moyer Rec Center at 6:30, and that meeting is open to the public.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. The Public Safety Committee will be meeting on Wednesday of this week at 4 o'clock. We're meeting an hour earlier because we have a pretty full schedule or agenda. We'll be hearing from Chief we'll be hearing from Chief Stokes, who will share with us his department goals for 2016. We'll also hear about a newly formed sprinkler committee and learn about their goals for their committee use. We will hear also about a reassignment of a medic unit into the Annapolis Next Station. We'll hear from the Department of Emergency Preparedness, an overview of the blizzard of 2016, and we will hear about the continuity of government plan, which allows us to operate in the event that our facility is not available. Arrangements have been made for alternative use. We'll also have a report from Mr. Heller from the Human Relations Commission. He will present to us and then to the full council his recommendations on police relations in the city. And lastly, we will hear from Chief Priestoup to continue the discussion on the recommendations from the Caucus of African American Leaders. So we have a pretty tight schedule and hoping to get it all in 2.5 hours, so please join us.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
During comments by the general public, you can speak on anything that's not already scheduled for a public hearing. So if you came tonight to talk about the departmental reorganization, that will be a public hearing after this. So there's 2 people signed up to speak, Mr. Young-El and Mr. Rao. You could join us and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Annapolis City Council. My name is Boaz Young-El. I am the political representative for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 400 out of Landover, Maryland. Local 400 represents the Annapolis police officers as well as hundreds of other hardworking residents of Annapolis. Before I go any further, I would ask that all our police officers stand and be recognized for all of their hard work in protecting our communities and just being out there in general in these hard times, especially as dangerous as it is. So if they could just all stand and be recognized. Thank you. I'm here just to make a couple comments in regards to the budget. The budget as presented to the City Council tonight includes no cost of living increase for the city employees. And we would just ask that there be strong consideration given to including some increases to the cost of living for our city employees. As we know, each year the cost of living goes up. The same cannot be said for our employees' wages and benefits. And so without saying too much about it, we ask that you seriously consider including the cost of living increase as well as a general increase to the police department's budget. As much as they protect us, we need to make sure that they have all the resources that they need in terms of supplies, manpower, in order to do their job to protect our communities. So in closing, the budget will be in you all's hands. We will be watching. We hope you all do the right thing and include these increases if at all possible. And just in one final matter, we would just like to go on record, UFCW Local 400 in representation of the Annapolis Police Force, in saying that we are in opposition to the Human Resources Department being placed under the Finance Department. An independent and professional human resources department is key to any public or private sector organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderman Littman?
Would you mind just elaborating on that last point so I can understand your opposition a little better?
We believe that, when talking in terms of disciplinary actions, as we know that the Human Resources Department is in charge of those, we would like those to go to an executive branch rather than a financial branch of the city and local government. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is William Rowell. I live at 2134 Mulberry Hill Road, Annapolis, Maryland, 21409. Mr. Mayor, City Manager, and esteemed council persons, I come here on behalf of the Caucus of African American Leaders. I'm sure many of you recognize me. Just wanted to follow up on your State of the City address and also concerns about the budget. Understanding that managing a city is not an easy task, aside from the administrative, operational, and fiscal management, it is extremely important to remember that you are also tasked with responding to the constituents you represent, which I'm sure you're well aware of. The reason why I say that is because more than 6 months ago, the Caucus of African American Leaders, as well as the NAACP and the American Civil Liberties Union, presented a series of recommendations that included things such as an African American liaison position to interface with the African American community in Annapolis, which we understand is not monolithic, nor is it a community that has immediate pipelines to city business, which can also be identified by looking at the audience that's here tonight to see the address. But it also included things such as funding for dash cameras and officer-mounted cameras, or body cameras, as we call them, and also funding for training, which we, along with other experts, actually developed a white paper through research and also pulling it from federal recommendations that came from President Obama and his administration, as well as looking at what they're doing in Baltimore City and other cities across our nation. What we have found since we presented those recommendations, which became public, is that there's overwhelming support from marginalized communities in Annapolis. And I say that because we're not, again, just speaking about the African American community as a monolithic community. We're speaking of communities such as the Latino Hispanic community in Annapolis, and also some of those communities of people who find themselves on the other side of having a voice. And of course, what we know is that manifests itself in a way that unfortunately falls on law enforcement. It falls on how they interface with those that are protecting and serving in the city of Annapolis. So today what I'm doing is looking for somewhat of a reminder that those members of the community and those constituents that you represent are actually looking for progressive policies that move us further as a city and a united, holistic city, and not just those that have a voice and not just those that are able to weigh in on fiscal decisions and be on certain committees or have the notoriety and pocketbook to be able to fall on your agenda. So as I said, what we did is we drafted 12 recommendations that we submitted for your consideration, and I'm simply here today to ask, in the course of all that we presented, in the case of the budget, and in the case of how we're projecting our next 12 months, what is going to be steps that move us closer to either realizing what those recommendations presented, or how will we fiscally move towards empowering some of those communities that may not be readily represented. So again, thank you.
Thank you. If anybody else from the public would like to address the council, Mr. Eads.
Good evening, Councilman, Mr. Mayor. I have three quick things I want to get to. First, Mr. Mayor, I don't know, is there any city protocol? Ex-Alderman Classy Hall's husband's funeral was today. There was no address from the mayor's office directly. And I think this lady served 12, 14 years or whatever it was. For her not to be recognized or given any type of sympathy directly from the mayor's office, it's just inappropriate. That's the first thing. Second thing, when you first took office some years ago, you and I had a word, and I was here about the blacks that were being fired, and you said to me, Mr. Eads, you don't think no white person knows what's good for a black community? And my response to you was, I don't think so, because in order to know what goes on in the black community, you have to live in the black community to experience what we need and what our desires are, what our needs are, and what needs to be taken care of. Saying that to say that here you go again, appointing two people, or put up for appointment two people to go on the Board of Education, who I have no doubt about what their qualifications are in their field. But they know nothing about our community. They haven't lived in our community. They don't know what our community needs. And to bring somebody into our community when there's, or to attempt to put somebody on the Board of Commissioners overlooking the public housing, which is 90% African American, you're missing the point again. Let me finish, Mr. Mayor, then you can say, they don't know what our needs are. They don't know what our wants are, what our desires are. When there are plenty qualified African Americans who grew up in our community, who know what the needs are, who represent our community, who have the qualifications, some even overqualified, to sit on this Board of Commissioners, why would you go outside of the African American community to find someone to make judgments on the call on predominant African community? That's the second. And last thing I'd like to say is, I live on Pleasant Street, Penrose, where they're really dogging us out over there. All of a sudden, they came up on Pleasant Street, and they cut out 3 parking spots to put in a dumpster, which sits away from their buildings, but directly in front of us homeowners. Now, number one, they're taking away 3 parking spots, which we pay to park there. Number 2, why is it that they need to put their dumpster where we're going to have to deal with the odor, the smell? They're not going to come out and put up their child. They're going to send their children out. And they're going to dump those bags all along the side of there. So if homeowners are going to have to worry about stray cats, rodents, and everything else. This is not, as you would say, well, this is a request in writing to show where it was approved that those 3 spots could be cut up. I mean, they cut City Street out, sidewalk and street. Who gave them permission to do that, where it was approved to do that? And what is the city going to do about us homeowners now who are being affected? We've been crying about parking spaces. You know, I've been coming down here for the last few months, crying about when they were attempting to give them parking spaces. Now they come and just take parking spaces. When are we going to have to stop suffering in the African American community? When do we always going to be the one on the bottom of the totem pole? Please don't say I testify. This is not a testify. This is a request in writing to when it was approved, who approved it, and when does Penrose get the authority to just come in and cut up City Street and eliminate parking that we pay for? Thank you.
Mr. Eads, to the point you brought up, who approved it would be the HACA board. From my understanding, you actually were in support of the Penrose project when it was going through. No, you finished.
I was not approved. I was
Robert,
not. I'm not going to let you put that on me.
Robert,
okay, go ahead.
I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me.
Okay.
On the HACA board, talk about representation of African American and white community. One of my appointments is African American. And while he may not have grown up in the housing units in the city of Annapolis, I don't think that should disqualify him. Your premise that only someone who grew up on HACA properties could be on the board.
That's not what I said.
Right, let me finish. I don't think is accurate. Mr. Dordan, who ran the Anne Arundel County healthcare system, I mean, you talk about a major medical facility, a complex organization, is going to bring efficient management to it. Mr. Flynn, who's African American, went to the Naval Academy, worked in the Pentagon, worked for the state's attorney's office, is going to bring much needed oversight to the board. The reason you don't have parking on that area and Penrose is walking all over is because past administrations and the HACA board signed bad deals that we're now stuck with living with. And believe me, it's not the first time I've inherited something bad. And to the point, and I will go back and find it, and I hope I'm not incorrect in this, but you were a supporter of the Penrose property and helped sell it to the community at the time.
Well, Mr. Mayor, no, I wasn't.
All right.
I came on board, I was sitting on it, and then we had, and that's why the fallout between Ms. Trudy McFall and I was when they started to do the Penrose, they said one thing and they did another. And I've been coming down here fighting. As long as Alderman Sheila Finlayson been on board, she can tell you that I was not in approval of it. No matter what they put in writing, I was against that. So you're telling me HACA now has the authority to give away City Street?
No.
Because those spots I'm talking about was City Street. City Street. So you're saying it was approved by HACA to do City Street. And thirdly, my response was people who live in our community, who grew up in a community, I didn't say HACA, an African American community, I said, who knows what our needs are, what our desires are, and what it takes to do that is what I said. I didn't say HACA had to be living in HACA. Now, you can go back as far as you want. Yes, when it first started out, I was in approval of Old Court being tore down and redone because it was crumbling down. College Creek Terrace was supposed to be rehabbed. As far you really want to go, Governor Ehrlich pledged $200,000 to bring to bring Old Court and College Creek Terrace up to code, and another $7,000 to redo it. Miss Trudy McFall and them refused to apply for the money. And that's where we split.
Right.
So don't say I was in support of them because I was not.
Well, we can go back and argue that on
No,
another
we're not
day.
arguing. I'm just stating the facts that you
Right.
can look up. Those are stuff you can go and look up. That's not just out of my mouth.
Right. Alderman Payan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was told that, in fact, they had not obtained proper permits to cut the sidewalk and to cut out the parking spots, that appropriate action will be taken. I don't know what that is, but that's what I was told at the Department of Public Works last week when I was there.
City manager and I will follow up first thing tomorrow morning. That gives you the whole council a status on that.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I have to add to Mr. Eads' comments. I can't tell you how much that community is on edge right now because they feel like they haven't been treated very well particularly by Penrose, indirectly by the city, but mostly the anger is at Penrose right now. Parking is absolutely at a premium in that neighborhood. What Mr. Eads said is absolutely correct. I thought it was 2 spots, but maybe it's 3. I don't think there's anybody here on this council that has to wake up every morning and walk out the front door and look at a dumpster. That's the first thing they see, and I really think we ought to try to get together with the folks putting that up and have a conversation, shall we say, and see what can be done. The community there is very angry indeed about a number of the things that are going on. Not everybody and not everything that's gone on, but there's definitely been some high-handed treatment on the part of certain companies or individuals, and that needs to stop. As a matter of fact, it's too late right now, but we need to take a look at that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. We've had 3 speakers this evening, and while Alderman Payon has responded to Mr. Eads, and thank you, I was going to request that the city manager be sure to get back to Mr. Eads with the answer. Mr. Mayor, you said you would also. Likewise, I would ask that we also respond to Mr. Rowell with our plan for responding to the caucus recommendations. I know they're in the hands of the Public Safety Committee, but we don't know what's going to happen once we present to the full council, which I hope is next month. But I think it's only fair that the community see what the process is going to be and hold us to it. And as far as the first speaker is concerned, we'll be talking lots with them. So don't feel like we're not responding, but the budget process has just begun today, so our discussions will have just begun. Thank you.
Alderman Kirby?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Me and Alderman Payon and Mr. Eads did have some just brief conversation behind the dumpsters over at Penrose on Pleasant Street. And as I sit here and look at Pleasant Street, it's almost inconceivable that they would find a location for a dumpster on Pleasant Street. It's a very narrow street. I know they say if you can drive in Annapolis on those little teeny streets, and they're not one way, they're two way. You can drive anywhere in the country. So, but Pleasant Street really highlights that, and with the dumpster and trash blowing, and like you said, children going to the dumpsters. I don't see where. I would hope that Public Works does look into that. That's certainly going to be an eyesore on every property owner on Pleasant Street, and I wasn't aware that that was happening. So, I'd like to be involved with that outcome and see how this came about. On the other issue, Mr. Eads, tomorrow night at 7:30, Alderman Lippman, Alderman Budge, myself will be at the Housing and Human Welfare Committee. We're not going to give you a half-hour time, but if you have 2 or 3 questions that you would like to ask the 2 candidates to the Board of Commissioners, I think we'll let you ask those questions. Right?
I just like saying, anything you get from Penrose, please get it in writing. Alderman Payon and I was sitting in a meeting talking to the head person there, and they told us that there was no green space or no place for recreation because the city didn't allow them to build on these 2 areas. I told Mr. Perrone, come back and look. They stuck up houses there anyway, so don't take their word for it. They lied to me and a city alderman to our face. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to testify? Seeing no motion, I declare petitions, reports, and communications closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar.
Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Mr. Mayor, will you entertain motions?
Yes.
First? May I start?
Please.
I'd like to request the removal of GT 1416, GT 1516, and GT 1616 from the consent calendar. Until we get a little bit more experience with this consent calendar, I don't think I'm going to be comfortable with GTs being on it. So just as an advance notice for future GTs.
Okay. Alderman Pan?
I'm not sure if that's a motion. If it is, maybe.
You don't need a motion.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, Madam Clerk, maybe you can explain to us exactly what should go on the consent docket, because there was a great deal of confusion about that. I know when we discussed it at lunch today at our table, and hey, you got me.
Okay.
I didn't have an explanation.
Okay. The first thing I have to say, this is Alderman Budge's bill, and so blame him.
It's his fault.
It's his fault. Okay, but basically the consent agenda is for any item that's not controversial. So as of today, the only items, when you look at your first agenda with the consent items on it, the only thing that we did not put on there was second readers that had amendments. So everything else we considered non-controversial. We sent your agenda out to you 2 Fridays ago, and ask you, is there anything on your agenda that you would like to remove? And it doesn't take anything. All you have to do is tell us, and we'll take it off. You don't have to explain why at all. But if you don't send your request to our office before the final agenda goes out, you have to make your next changes to the agenda here at this meeting. So that's why some of you have some notes on your desk, because your request came in after our deadline. So you can say you want to remove item number blank, blank, and blank, and you can do it right now. And then we would approve the consent items the consent calendar with the items you have left on there. So if anybody.
Alderman Kirby?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Clerk, just for the record, I'd like R-09-16 taken off the consent calendar as well tonight. Okay. And I, like my colleague, Alderman Payon, I believe it's new to us right now, so it's going to take some explanation. But I'd really like to know how we make the choice as to what goes on a consent calendar and what does not. This buzzword is not controversial. There are very few things that cross this desk in this council that's not controversial. The simplest of items sometimes take 90 days. So.
It's up to you. We send it out to you. If you don't like it, you can just notify us and we will happily take it off.
Alderman Budge?
I might add that the city clerk's office puts items on the consent calendar based on the information that the city clerk has. She has no idea how we are going to react to some of these bills, and so she gives it her best effort. It's up to us who know how we are going to, who knows what we think about it, to tell her, yeah, no, we want to talk about that. Take it off consent. And that's one reason why the getting something off of the consent calendar, all you have to do is ask. You don't have to give reasons, doesn't have to be seconded, just say I want it off and it's done.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
I think it feels to us, and again, it's new, that it cloudies our business and reduces transparency to the community who's watching. Because in most cases, the community looks to hear our discussion. And when we first looked at the first draft of the calendar or the agenda, everything except for the public hearing was on it. So that meant that we could take one vote and everything would be done except for the public hearing. Yes, that's what it was. And I think that gave many of us a level of discomfort. And so I guess maybe we need to think about qualifying exactly what we want on the consent calendar. I don't know how we would do that. And I suspect it works in different organizations. Not sure it works when we have a public that's watching what we do and listening to how we respond to things. But that being said, I'd like to have removed R10-16, R12-16, and R13-16, and I'd like a public hearing on each one of those. Okay. Those are all on first reader.
So I guess there's a motion on the floor we'll include all of the removals to be taken off the consent calendar.
We don't need a motion, I don't think.
All right. So with everything removed, I guess we could take a vote on.
Would you like me to
Only
read it?
those things, only
Yeah,
some
only
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah,
They were on the original. If you like, I can tell you what they just took off. Want me to read that?
The city clerk will read back what was just taken off. If you have any additions, you can certainly tell her and she'll take them off as well.
Okay. The items removed from the consent agenda tonight were item number 3, GT 1416, item number 4, GT 1516, item number 5, GT 1616, item number 16, R916, item number 17, R1016, item number 19, R1216, and item number 20, R1316.
Any other additions?
No additions, but just to comment on, for what Alderwoman Finlayson just said, although a lot of us had things to take off, this will be efficient in that we now, once we get settled this down, we have about 10 things that we'll be able to take up with one vote, minutes, some first readers, some second readers that had no discussion. So I think it'll work once we get comfortable with it, I guess is my point.
You can ask them to approve of the consent agenda.
All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
All been adopted.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panelides,
Aye.
Alderman Payon,
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles,
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson,
Aye.
Alderman Littman,
Aye.
Alderman Kirby,
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
Alderman Bud.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing, beginning with Charter Amendment CA-1-16, Departmental Reorganization.
The first three people signed up to speak, Amy Clements, Bill Kardash, and Doug Smith. Good evening. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Amy Clements, 17 Southgate Avenue, Annapolis. I'm speaking here on behalf of the Spa Creek Conservancy. I'm the president of the Spa Creek Conservancy, all-volunteer organization working on stormwater issues in the Spa Creek watershed. And as an organization that is working on some major grants on city property and in the city, I am in support of this reorganization because it will make our process much smoother and much less expensive. We've spent tens of thousands of extra dollars that should have been going into the ground on redesigning projects because we've had to go from one office to another, back to the first one, back to a third one. So having the DNEP folded into the Department of Planning and Zoning would be a major benefit to and all organizations like the Spa Creek Conservancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, Ms. Clemens, what about the other part of the reorganization? Do you have an opinion on putting HR in the Finance Department?
I'm sorry, I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Kirby?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Clemens. Is it time or money? The
It's
reorganization,
both. It's been both. It's
and the reorganization will help both of those?
yes.
Can you expound on how it would help it? Just for my benefit.
Well, I'll give you an example. We have a grant working in the headwaters of Spa Creek, and it's a $2.8 million grant from the State Trust Fund. So most of that property is city property, which we are trying to recreate Spa Creek from a stormwater culvert, basically, back into a stream wetland area. And it's a big project. It's very complicated. So when we did the first design, we would come to one of the departments. We were working mostly with DNEP, and we would bring the design to DNEP, and there would be changes to be made. So we'd have to go back to the contractor, make the changes, come back, possibly make other changes, and then we had to go to another department, to planning and zoning, and they'd say, well, we need this in that design. So then we'd have to go back to the designers again and make the changes, come back. So it was weeks. Everything takes a couple of weeks if you're going from one office to another to set up meetings and to redesign a project. And it takes a lot of money because we have to pay the contractor who's doing the redesign.
So okay, and what I'm hearing now is that with the reorganization, your hit list will all occur at one time. If there's some planning and zoning issues there, or if there are some environmental issues there, it's going to be a one-time fix. and you're going to be in that office one time. The planning zoning person and the environmental person are going to give you a checklist one time of
Well-
what you need to correct. You go back to that engineer or whatever and just bring it back and it's fixed.
Well, in a perfect world,
That's
of course.
in a
It would only
perfect
be
world.
one meeting, but I'm sure that's not going to ever happen.
Okay.
But at least if you have the people in the room at the original meeting and you know what's required, it will make it much easier for any kind of redesign. You don't have to go back and forth, 5 and 6
Okay.
times to do that. So
And-
we were looking for more of a streamlined process for any
Okay.
projects like this.
Okay, and let me just ask one final question. I know that if you hold that office, and I have no reason to believe you don't, have you ever just discussed those issues personally with Ms. Broadband or Mr. Gottwald to make it easier?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Clements, you indicated that all these folks weren't at the initial meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you never asked why, or you knew why, or I'm just wondering.
No, we assumed that the people in the city would know who should be at the meeting, so I didn't know, when you're coming in with something like that, you don't necessarily know which department is in charge of which kind of projects, and so we knew that most everything went through DNAP, but didn't know that there was a lot with planning and zoning and all the, pieces of that.
So if these people had been at the original meeting, it would have been streamlined in itself?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just getting a clarification.
Yes. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. In a nutshell, I favor, hope you heard that all. I think greater organizational efficiency for the bureaucracy, not to mention the public, is a good thing. And I like the creation of a separate Office of Environmental Policy to give this matter more prominence. But for as long as I can remember, the city has talked about making the permit process more efficient. Maybe now even the elusive one-stop shop will be realized. While I'm not a developer, I have had opportunity to use the permit process for construction and renovation projects. In general, my experiences have been quite good, but it's taken more steps than seems logical. For those who use the process as part of their business needs, I'm sure the efficiencies will be welcome. As I look at the reorganization, I notice mostly organizational consolidation. I read in today's Capital, the reorganization was done mostly with no reductions in staff. I know this is a touchy subject. Some of you may have departmental loyalties. Others may have bureaucratic loyalties. Regardless, somewhere, somehow, combining staff and function should yield reductions in force and the cost savings those reductions could generate. I hope you will consider the opportunity for such cost savings. And based on the FY 2017 budget just presented, it sounds like kicking the financial can down the road may be coming to a dead end. Sooner or later, this council and the taxpayers of Annapolis will be faced with epic choices. Reduce services, cut expenses, which invariably means personnel, or raise taxes and fees. I think you can guess which choice most taxpayers would favor. Every year, the city seems to just squeak by on balancing the budget, at least on paper. But wouldn't it be nice to have a true operating surplus that could be used to accelerate some of our infrastructure projects rather than stretch them out over years? But that takes financial strength, flexibility, and some tough decision-making. Like the returning Ospreys, it seems that each year I stand before you to comment on the inordinately large number of city employees we have for a city of 38,000 residents, some 600 employees, and far more than other Maryland cities, including those much larger than the city of Annapolis. In closing, I hope you will use the proposed departmental reorganization as an opportunity, a down payment if you will, to closely examine core city functions versus non-essential services and make progress toward more cost-effective services. The impact of such budgetary savings could be enormous for the city and the taxpayers you serve and the long-term fiscal health of our city. Thank you.
Alderwoman Pendel Charles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kardash. Do you have, off the top of your head, you indicated that there's some essential services and there's some non-essential. Do you have any examples?
Yeah,
possibly?
I think most people would agree that core services are would be such like fire, police, certainly public works, the finance and administration. Those are the core things I think most people expect in any government organization. Once you step into parks and recreation, even parts of planning and zoning, what you could consider to be non-essential. But for the most part, I think the core services are pretty much fundamental.
Why would you say rec and parks is not?
Well, those are they're not essential to the functioning of the city government. I think taxpayers expect police, fire, public works, water safety, water, sewer to be the core services. Anything over and above that really are additional services that the public asks for.
So if there's a resident who has difficulty with paying, say, for a private gym, but can afford the public pool, the price of going to rec and parks to work out, I'm just going to guess that for them, that's a core service.
You're probably correct. But that's not, I think when you take a look at the overall, I mean, there are cities that have airports, which is not considered to be an essential service. There are cities that have certainly parks and recs and very, very major, all sorts of athletic facilities. But those aren't core services that you would expect or need to function as a public government. And everything else, sure, we can add anything we want, but those are things that the mayor and council would respond to by virtue of the public wants them, not that the public needs them.
I guess my point would be maybe the core services in Ward 3 may not be the same as in Ward 1.
I can't comment on what...
No, I'm just saying, when it comes to priority or what certain people are looking for, say for instance transportation, if I need the bus to get to work, then for me, the bus is a core service. And that's my whole, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just looking at perspectives and what may be core for some people may not be core for others.
There's no question that that's a dialogue that I think the community needs to have to determine what's core, what's essential, and what's what I am calling a non-essential service.
And I guess that's what we wrestle with as a council.
Right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Alderman Kirby.
Yeah, Mr. Kardash, I know you've been around as long as I have on the council, and you watch the budget sometimes better than us. So I'm glad you're here, and I know you're going to continue straight through the budget process, and I just want you to make us keenly aware when we start going through this budget where you see the pitfalls are, and if the reorg's going to cause problems in other places. I mean, I think we all know who you are, and we know you have that very keen interest, so we'll be looking forward to you sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to attend as many of the budget hearings as I can and get involved. I think the staff has done a pretty good job in trying to recommend and analyze where this is going. But until you really get into the numbers, certainly from a citizen perspective, it looks different. But I'd be happy to share them with those.
Okay.
those
Well, I talked a lot to the city manager today about putting a price tag on the whole thing, and of course we got the budget tonight. So I'm sure all of those things will work its way out, and I just need to see if it's worth it. Right now, I don't know. I have a lot of doubts, but thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people are Doug Smith, Robert Eads, and Rob Savage.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name's Doug Smith. We reside at 5 Rebel Street. I'm speaking as a citizen. I'm speaking in support of the reorganization. I think these are good changes that are taking place. Putting MIT under city manager makes good sense. This MIT function services the whole city, all the departments. Transferring HR to the finance department. It's been done in many other cities. It's a combination of administrative functions. That makes sense. Transferring portions of DNEP into especially the inspections and permitting. We're getting closer to the one-stop shop, and that's been recommended by a number of transition teams. So I'm glad to see that we're starting to take efforts to do that. It does combine some logical things. The stormwater management in the public works area that handles a lot of our infrastructure, I think that makes great sense. And getting things simpler, I think Ms. Clements gave a very good example of how confusing it can be if you don't deal with these departments every day, to have to go back and forth between a number of departments. Putting that in one spot, I think, will help us be a better service provider. But then I'd also like to take kind of a different look at this, that I'm really glad the administration is putting the time and effort to look at different ways and better ways to organize the city functions. The easy thing to do is just to stay with things the way they are and not make a change. But I think this is good work. It'll help improve the way we deliver services to the city. And I also wanted to point out that the work with the people that are doing the work, they're bringing those resources with them. So we're lucky to have good, talented people as department heads of public works and planning and zoning. They can take on these broader responsibilities. I think it unifies some of our functions, as well as takes advantage of people in our department heads that have good, strong management skills. I also want to say that this reorg, there's no hint here of any negatives toward the people that are doing the work. These functions were set up by this council. The people that are doing the work are doing a good job. We're just trying to align them better with where it makes more sense. So I support this recommendation for reorganization. I think it'll make our city deliver the services in a better way. Thank you.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Smith, as you recall, both you and I served on the previous administration's transition team, and part of that was the reorganization. You chaired that committee. Honestly, I don't recall, but do you remember if any of what we're proposing here in this legislation parallels what we talked about, or what recommendations we came up with?
Well,
I'm picking your brain.
Yeah, I remember, well, we've served on a number of transition teams, and one footnote is I'm glad to see some recommendations not sitting on the shelf, but actually getting put to work. The ones that I do recall are the combination of things called administrative services. So I think the HR combination with financial is a combination of administrative services. The one I remember the most is the combination of DNEP with planning and zoning. That's come up at least 3 times to get us to a one-stop shop for those services. So I think it's come up a couple times. And the notebooks, I know where we can find the notebooks, so we could read the recommendations.
I'd like to see it. I'm sure I can't find it, but
Okay.
if you can provide me a copy as well as Alderwoman Finlayson.
Sure.
And anyone else on the council, that'd be good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Mr. Smith, I particularly would like to see the recommendation as it applies to HR and finance. I think the misperception is that we will not lose a position. I think we heard that we will, but the workload won't go away. So while we're eliminating what would be 2 positions, the work of those 2 people will remain and fall to the shoulders of others who already have excellent staff who's already in-house.
Yeah.
So I'd look to see how the transition team came up with their recommendation and how that all works.
Okay. We're
Thank
going to
you.
have to count on the people that kept those notebooks. I didn't get a full set of
Who
notebooks.
was your staff person? Did you
My
have a
staff?
staff liaison from the city to the transition team?
I think there's a copy of the past transition reports in the city manager's office. We can find it and distribute it. There we go. Alderman Arnett has one right there.
Your nose grows every time you talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Kirby.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Smith, I think it's just interesting to hear you speak to the reorg and the satisfaction that our other department heads are going to assume some extra work and that they're going to be fine with it. And in a couple of days, I think we're going to have the chance as a council to query just those things with our department heads involved in the reorg. So I guess I'm just finding that interesting at this point, that you would know that and none of us are privy to that knowledge right now.
I'm sure they can speak for themselves.
Correct.
But my interaction with folks that head these departments, the Public Works area, we're lucky to have David Jarrell, who's managed a department order of magnitude larger than Annapolis. So that's good. I think Pete Gutwald has managed other departments that are bigger and broader than ours in other communities. So I think they'll be able to speak well to their capabilities.
Okay. I guess watch out, Joe.
Mr. Savage.
Thank you. My name is Rob Savage. I live at 12 Wind Whisper Lane. I'm here to testify in support of the reorganization proposal. And I know I may not always agree with the mayor, but in this case I do think he's actually right on track. And as a former DNEP employee, I do believe integrating DNEP staff with the planning and zoning staff is a natural step. DNEP review staff regularly work with planning and zoning during the development review process and even conduct field work together. In fact, we often thought to ourselves that it would make much more sense for us to work for planning and zoning rather than in a separate department. Formalizing this connection would not only help staff, but also serve to fully integrate the environmental review with the development review process. I believe this would lead to better development projects that more closely adhere to our environmental regulations and goals, starting at an earlier point in the process. But I feel there are more reasons to support this reorganization than simply improving efficiency. As you know, I've raised serious concerns regarding DNEP's management over the years. And while the mayor has not cited the incompetence of said management as a motivating factor behind his proposal, I wish he had. I worked for Ms. Broadbent, the DNEP director, for nearly 7 years, day in and day out. I witnessed how Broadbent told staff to avoid prying public eyes and keep things off the record. I witnessed how she constantly belittled the public boards and told staff not to cooperate with them. I witnessed how she completely mismanaged the city's forest conservation program that led to the loss of state-protected forests in the city. I witnessed firsthand how she pressured staff to alter review comments and actions on development projects and other permits. And I witnessed firsthand how she retaliated against employees who were simply trying to do their jobs and enforce the laws of the people. So this is not how a director, a public servant, should operate. And similarly, I personally believe a compelling reason for you to back this reorganization is to support the DNEP staff themselves. I'm still in touch with many of the DNEP employees, and they need your support. I witnessed Ms. Broadbent abuse of employees, her retaliatory behavior, her bullying, her discrimination against political affiliation, her paranoia, and witnessed how she was destroying DNEP from the inside out. And in fact, her management was so pernicious, it actually led to us trying to form a union twice. And thank you, Alderwoman Finlayson, for your support in those efforts. I just ask you and all of the council to continue supporting the employees and support this reorganization. Get Ms. Broadbent out of any management role and ideally get her out of the city government entirely. And please do not defend her over the rest of the DNEP employees, both male and female, who deserve a positive leader. Unfortunately, this mismanagement and support of staff is not a stated reason, again, for the reorganization. And it would seem that the mayor may just appoint Ms. Broadbent as the new head of the Office of Environmental Policy. That would be a terrible mistake. If you're going to reorganize, do it the right way. Make it a part of your campaign pledge to sweep clean the city. Get rid of some of the useless leadership up top. Get new people who would cost the city less money and who actually value civility and transparency in governance and understand their role as servants to the public. Get someone in there who's respected by the environmental community. And make no mistake, if the community wasn't afraid of retaliation from Broadbent, they would be here in solidarity. In itself, this new environmental office is a great idea. It would serve to unite the environmental initiatives amongst city departments and help the mayor champion his green initiatives. That's good. But not if you appoint Ms. Broadbent. And why would you appoint someone who has failed to show environmental leadership or even to follow the mayor's own stated policies? Someone who the environmental community dislikes, whose department staff, her own staff, absolutely abhor, and someone who has such contempt for her staff, for the public, and our commissions and our laws. But despite all that, I still think the new Office of Environmental Policy would be an improvement with the right person in charge. And I do still support this reorganization. In theory, it could be quite a positive direction for the city as long as there is continuity in environmental programs. And I hope that you all will work with the mayor to make this reorganization a step forward for the city, the staff, and the environment. Thank you.
Alderman Kirby.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Savage, when you work for a man, you stand by the institution he represents. You don't condemn, eternally find fault while part of an organization. We're here talking about a reorganization, and where does it fit in a budget? And I hear you talking of spilt milk of sorts. Ms. Broadbent's conduct as a department head isn't before this body. A reorganization is. We've got to figure out maybe how Ms. Broadbent fits in if we should decide to go this route. But until we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But we simply want to deal with a reorganization right now. I have the greatest respect for Ms. Broadbent and so does her colleagues in the city government. I haven't spoken with the workers, but I've had not a one to say anything in my 7 years on this council about her performance on the job as a supervisor. And I haven't queried my colleagues. I think that's a very unfair characterization for what we're trying to do here tonight. Thank you.
Well, I bring it up because I think you need to consider it during your deliberations. It's important. You should try to actually talk with staff, right? Talk with people in the community about Ms. Broadbent's actions. Learn for yourself. I sent all of you last year a report with evidence, reams of evidence supporting this. And it is related. This has to be looked at as a part of the reorganization. I'm trying to give voice to some of the employees who are in the department, most of the employees in that department. And I just want to ask you to consider that.
I answer my phone 24/7. The earlier the wee hours of the morning, I tend to think it's because of the areas I govern. I tend to think that those are very critical calls. I don't even let those by. I pick up.
Alderman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Savage, you and I had an exchange last year about the same subject. And really, I think it's very unfortunate. And I'm normally a person who keeps pretty calm. But I really consider it, and you know how I feel about this. It's very unfortunate for you to come here, and we're talking about the reorganization, as Alderman Kirby has indicated, for you to rail against Ms. Broadbent. I think it's inappropriate. This is not the place for it. And frankly, I'm really tired of hearing about it. And you know, because we went through an exchange last year about this. And really, I think this is beyond the pale. We're talking about reorganization. We're trying to do and get through this budget. But when we make it personal, then it's gone over the line. And I'm really disappointed tonight in listening to this. And I really don't want to hear any more about it.
This is not, it is personal for me, but it's also very professional. Again, that's why I submitted evidence to the whole entire council.
And we've heard that evidence. I just want to state for the public and for my colleagues on the council, people alluded to it earlier, part of the reason there weren't layoffs in the budget is that reorganization and budget is separate. You can do the two things on their own. Will it coincide at some point? I'm sure it will. But reorganization doesn't have to do with people, it has to do with process. And that's why we're going through this. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, I agree with my colleagues. Personal attacks are inappropriate and out of line. But one thing for clarification, I do encourage all employees to organize. So it has nothing to do with personalities or department. Regardless of the department, I think everybody has a right to representation. So please don't misrepresent my actions as an attack against a city employee. That was not the case at all. Thank you.
Okay, please don't characterize this is not a personal attack. I've remained professional in here. They're professional things. She broke the law. She abused staff. Those things need to be brought up.
Alderman Budge has a comment or question.
Yes, I'd like to second, third, or fourth the comments of my colleagues that have spoken earlier. And I'd also like to remind everyone that in this reorganization, we are changing laws to move departments around, to move functions around. And as legislatures, when we make laws for all people, for whether they are the current director or a future director. The laws change slowly, we hope, and we'll be putting in place a structure that is designed to stand the test of time. And it is absolutely, in my experience in large organizations, it is absolutely the wrong thing to do to design an organization based on what you think of any particular individual in it. The organization itself has to have integrity in its own right, independent of the personnel that are filling the positions.
Thank you for coming by. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to testify? Please come forward. Now is your opportunity. You can state your name and address for the record.
My name is Larry Clausen. I reside at 160 Prince George Street here in Ward 1. It's my privilege to serve on the executive board of the Ward 1 Resident Association, and my comments tonight in favor of the reorganization. In doing so, I represent the position of our board. In Ward 1, I want to put a bright note here. In Ward 1, there never seems to be a shortage of issues before the City Council that affect the quality of life in downtown Annapolis. Residents, merchants, developers regularly contend over views of the proper way to assert stewardship over our national treasure here, which is the historic district, and promotion of the city as a destination for tourism and sailing, and to encourage diverse downtown businesses. So then it's rare for the city council to consider a matter which should be a cause for celebration, in my view. That's a cause for celebration by all residents and businesses in the city, whatever their ongoing positions might be on various policies. In mid-February, Mr. Mayor, you proposed to the City Council this reorganization to realign the several agency programs and functions to improve the delivery of services to the citizens of Annapolis. And it's a straightforward, simple manner. It eliminates a multitude of problems with our city's government about which residents and businesses have complained for years. Yet this plan, in my written testimony, which I submitted to you, Madam Clerk, I said the plan was budget neutral. Actually, it's better than that. I believe there's some slight savings to the budget, probably. But in principle, city employees are not losing their jobs over this. The most significant organizational change is to transfer the programs of the Department of Neighborhood and Environmental Programs to other existing departments, whereas the Department of Planning and Zoning will assume responsibility for all regulatory matters pertaining to the development and subdivision process, rental licensing, code enforcement, residential and commercial building and trade permits, and port wardens. For years, many inside and outside of government have advocated combining permitting and inspection, as is customary in most every city elsewhere. A duplication of these functions in two departments has been confusing, frustrating, and costly to residents. We talk about the cost to the government. There's a tremendous cost to doing business if the city cannot handle permitting and inspections in an efficient way and deliver that service to both residents and developers. So it's been frustrating and costly. There are business and tradesmen who may have driven some providers entirely out of the city. In some instances, the duplication has been disastrous for the city. For example, it confounded recent efforts to deal with the disgraceful, dilapidated building, vacant building at 8 Maryland Avenue near Gate 3 of the Naval Academy. Other DNEP programs, stormwater management and erosion plan review, approvals and inspections, and wastewater pretreatment, will be transferred to the Department of Public Works. Who knew that these matters were not already being handled by Public Works? And who knew that ABC inspections were not already being handled by the police? This is so much common sense. It's so simple and straightforward. And consolidating the DNEP functions relating to environmental policy under the mayor makes perfect sense. There are two other functions affected by the reorganization that have come up with previous speakers. It seems to me so obvious that the information systems of the city should be under the mayor, under the city manager, because it serves the entire city government, and that's its mission. It can certainly do so more efficiently, and also to put the city manager in a position to explore public and private partnerships to update and improve services to user cities and agencies and cities. Moving human resources to finance, where it can combine with such other related human resources functions as workers' compensation, benefits, and payroll, seems equally obvious to me. Regarding the pending HPC legislation, I believe that the plan that has been drafted in such a way that the outcome of 0-7-16 will simply be a matter of replacing DNEP references to planning and zoning. There's no reason for the reorganization to be held up by deliberations over the HPC legislation. On the contrary, the reorganization would ideally be settled before the HPC legislation is resolved. We in Ward 1 are enthusiastic about this reorganization and encourage all others in Annapolis to join us in supporting the mayor's proposed reorganization. Establishing program responsibility within single departments with clear lines of responsibility, authority, and accountability cannot help but simplify government operations and the delivery of services to both residents and businesses throughout the city, and is completely in line with the city's move towards programmatic budgeting. So I thank you all very much for your consideration and hearing my views.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else from the public?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, for the record, my name is Corey Blake. I'm a resident, of Anne Arundel County. I'm the Deputy Director of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We represent many of the City of Annapolis employees. And Mr. Mayor, I thank you for your indulgence. I did not have a chance to sign up to testify. I did not plan on being able to be here tonight, and so my comments will be uncharacteristically short. Mr. Mayor, I rise in opposition to the reorganizational plan, but my comments are specific to the combining of the Human Resources Department and the Finance Department. Both of these departments have specific disciplines with their own degrees and certificates that come along with that. Finance Department focuses mainly on money, and budgets, and financial matters. But the Human Resources Department focuses on relationships, people, human needs. These issues that our members have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Issues like employee assistance programs, benefits, non-economic employee issues, collective bargaining. These issues, in our opinion, would be much better left in an independent Human Resources Department. So we would ask that you not combine Human Resources and Finance, leave those departments separate. Thank you.
No question.
Woman Pendell Charles?
Yes, Mr. Blake, can you give us a specific example as you represent the police department where you would find it not a good reason to combine the two departments?
Well, I would say, Alderwoman, that the representative for the police department was up here earlier, and but AFSCME does represent some employees in the police department, but the bulk of the other employees. And what I would say is two things. One, I intend to give written testimony that will go into much more detail. But two, you know, the issues that surround the things that our employees do, whether it's personal trauma, whether it's non-economic related employment issues, whether it's seeking assistance on how to gain promotions, none of those things have a financial impact. And the people who work in human resources do that because that's a specific trade. They get specific training for that, specific certificates, specific degrees, and a specific dedication to their craft. And our concern is if that department is rolled into the finance department, those specific trade crafts will not be a priority. The priority will be money and budgets and financial decisions primarily. So that is our primary concern.
So what you're saying, basically the human element is somewhat lost.
That is our concern, correct.
I'd like to see some specific examples, and we can talk about that later, but...
I'll be happy to supply that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a work session.
Anyone else?
Mhm.
Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on Alderwoman Finlayson?
Mr. Mayor, in light of the fact that we have a work session on Thursday on this very topic, I'd like for us to keep the public hearing open until the next meeting.
Madam City Clerk, is that a motion or is that to the discretion of the chair?
Make a motion that we keep the public hearing open. Okay. so
Second.
Well, can I? Until the first meeting in April.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to hold the public hearing open until the first meeting in April, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on ordinance O-12-16, City of Annapolis Department Reorganization.
Anybody sign up to speak? Doug Smith had signed up to speak, and he's the only one. We'll put it in the record exactly how you said it. Anyone else? All right, thank you. Seeing no motion, declare the public hearing on O-12-16 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The next item on the agenda is business and miscellaneous, beginning with items removed from the consent agenda. Consent agenda item number 3, GT-14-16, transfer of disposed vehicle sale revenue, training and education transfer to ADOT bundled capital facility improvement project.
Is there a motion to approve GT 14-16? Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions about this that the administration was very helpful in responding to over the past few days, but I do think it's worth or important for the administration to discuss what this transfer is. It won't be, I won't have a lot of questions afterwards.
Mr. Andrews or Mr. Miller, do you want to address it?
I'm sorry. The Bruce Miller, Finance Director, for the record. The purpose of this transfer is to move funds into the ADOT bundled project. This project was approved approximately a year ago, went out into the procurement process. Since that time, additional funds are needed. The source of funds is a disposed vehicle sale revolving fund. The money specifically here are funds that were sold, or a vehicle that was sold in the transportation department, and then training and education of approximately $3,000, which the director does not anticipate spending through the end of the year, therefore available for this purpose.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, a question for Mr. Miller. The disposed vehicle sale revenue, does that generally go towards replacement and maintenance of vehicles? What is that traditionally used for?
Just to set the table a little bit, about 3 years ago, we started selling city assets via auction on a more regular basis. At the same time, we also started a pay-go for vehicle replacement. So we thought it would be a good combination of putting these funds into a revolving fund that then fall to fund balance, but could be used for future vehicle expenditures, purchases, via, or rather than the maintenance. So this is specifically to purchase future assets. And the ADOT bundle project is a asset. Understanding it's not a vehicle, but it's a permanent brick and mortar type asset that has a long-standing depreciation, useful life. So we thought it would be a like purpose for using those funds.
I think we heard this evening that in the mayor's budget proposal, he is cutting funding for maintenance of vehicles. Did I get that correct? And if so, is this the pot of money that could be used, and I'm looking into next year's budget, of course, but Is this a pot of money that would be used for that purpose?
Those funds that are appropriated every year do go into that revolving fund.
Okay.
They are, even though they're not specific to the departments, specific departments, they go into the revolving fund and they're held there for future expenditures. It's a matter, quite honestly, about funding for a project that is currently online that I think we all agree needs to be completed. And so it's identifying available funds. I'm not going to say it's not going to impinge on possible future vehicle replacement because those funds are coming out of that account. So it probably will impinge on future vehicle replacement. But again, it's setting of priorities, and I would, basically agree with the director from transportation that one of his higher priorities is this bundle project.
And I'm not opposed to this GT. I'm just looking at how we're moving forward. Will we have other vehicles to dispose of to replenish this for next year? Because I am concerned about us maintaining our vehicles. I mean,
I think the conversation relative to PAYGO for vehicles and other assets will definitely be on the table for discussion as we go through the budgetary process.
okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Move for approval of the GT.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Need a second? Need a second?
Second. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll be back here at 9 o'clock.
Can we set the clock so it has the right time on it? Cindy, will you go back and ask Mr. Gerald if he can set the clock for us? 'Cause he's Where's the air conditioner? Yeah. Well, most of my doctors have been at Hopkins too.
The City Council is now back in session. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is another removed consent agenda, item number 4, GT-15-16, transfer from sidewalk improvement, CIP, transfer to PW Engineering and construction salaries, Public Works.
Is there a motion to adopt GT 1516? Your second? Director Gerald, if you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, David Gerald, Director of Public Works. This item is for our project inspector / coordinator for the sidewalk project. So the only way that we can pay his salary is to move the money from the CIP to the salaries line item. So it's for that purpose. This is a direct cost to the project, so it's a legitimate CIP cost.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, will you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is another removed consent agenda item number 5, GT-16-16, transfer from SW Res Contract Services, transfer to SW Res Overtime Public Works Residential Refuge.
Is there a motion to approve GT 16-16? Second. Director Gerald?
So this item is we're removing from the base contract the weekend street can collection, both recycling and refuse. That was an expensive item for them because they sent 2 trucks into the city just to pick up those street cans, and then they would leave town. So the deductive change order from their contract's a total of $27,415 each year. We calculated what it would take to allow our employees to do that. The minimum time for weekends for them to come in on overtime is 4 hours. So we're going to use 2 different employees each weekend to do that. We allowed some money for the operations and maintenance of the truck and for the street can liners. The total cost is $24,000 for a whole year. So we're actually going to save $3,000 by doing this. And we'll also have, as I mentioned, that's only about a 2-hour task, so we'll also have 2 hours each day for those employees to do additional things while they're here on overtime, essentially at no additional cost. So it made a lot of sense to us. This transfer is just for the remainder of this fiscal year. The change for a full fiscal year is going to be the $27,000 that I mentioned savings in the contract.
Alderman Littman?
Mr. Terrell, just to be clear, the contractor has no objection to this change?
No, he's already signed the contract modification.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, Mr. Gerald, I thought when we signed the contract with Bates that in part it was because we didn't have the capacity. Our trucks were aging and that kind of thing. So we do have adequate equipment to take care of this on the weekend?
You'll recall that when we did this managed comp, we actually had the city bid against the contractors.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And Bates was much less expensive. So it wasn't a capacity issue, it was really a cost issue because their bid was about half of what our bid was. So we got rid of all of our trash trucks except for one. We had one small truck that was still in reasonably good condition. All the other ones were 2004 models that were old and need to be replaced. And we put in our bids that we were going to replace those. But we do have the one truck left, so that's what we're using for this weekend collection is that one truck.
And that's adequate to do this
Yes.
job? Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on our agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is legislative actions on first reader, beginning with another removed consent agenda item number 16, R-09-16, Public Safety Employee Funeral Representation.
Is there a motion to adopt R-09-16 on first reader?
So move.
Second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like that, I'd like a public hearing on that, if at all possible. Thanks.
We will add that. Anyone else? All in favor? Alderman Littman?
Madam Clerk, just for future reference, if there's a resolution on first reader on the consent calendar, but we want a public hearing, do we need to take it off the consent calendar to ask for the public hearing? Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. I
I have a
refer.
Point of information?
Yes.
Have we voted on the consent calendar yet?
We did at the beginning, yes. We're
Okay,
going
so when
through
we
each of the
approved
items.
it, we were in essence voting on all of those items.
So this
everything
is what we
except-
took off now.
Okay, but I wasn't aware that we voted on everything. Okay, thank you.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
I refer
I got you. I got you.
R9016 on first reader to the Public Safety Committee and the Rules and City Government Committee. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is another removed consent agenda item number 17, R-10-16, position classifications and pay plan.
Is there a motion to approve R1016 on first reader?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Alderwoman Finlayson.
I'm looking to the city clerk to make sure I'm doing this correctly. I would like to request a public hearing on this legislation, on this resolution.
Will be a public hearing on the resolution. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. I refer R1016 to the Finance Committee and the Rules and City Government Committee.
I have a question.
Yes.
When there's a referral to a committee on a particular piece of legislation, but it's on the consent calendar, is it automatic? I'm trying to figure out how I ask this
Are
question.
they automatically
know the
sent to
question.
the committee?
Is it automatically sent to the committees? And if we have,
I
do
can
you know what
get-
I'm saying?
I've got this, yes.
I don't know.
In the city code, there are a number of provisions that certain matters in the code are automatically forwarded to various committees. If a matter is on the consent calendar, but it is required as a matter of code to go to that committee, it will go to that committee.
So we have to be aware of what the code states.
And I'm happy to send that to everybody, yes.
Okay. Because, okay. So if I don't know, I mean, I can't readily off the top of my head say which this piece of legislation would go to a certain committee, then I have to take it off the consent calendar if I wanted another committee to hear it.
If you wanted it to go to a committee that was not
Not in
one
the
of the
code.
mandated code committees, yes, you would have to remove it and request the hearing.
You know, it might be helpful on the next consent calendar, and we're all
Which
going through
ones
this
it
together.
goes to.
Maybe just write down which committee it goes to. So that way, if someone has a request, they know in advance.
I know that's more work, but.
No, that's easy.
That was a very good suggestion.
It's already in there. All you gotta do is open it. The original document has the referrals already in it.
Okay, I'll be honest,
Yeah.
I guess I overlooked it.
Every piece of legislation that's in Granicus, it's under the
Oh,
title.
yes, okay,
You open the
okay.
legislation.
I
the referrals
got
are
it,
right
I
there.
got it, yes. I understand.
Alderman Kirby?
Okay,
but,
thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, then you say,
Thank you.
you said if it's a piece of legislation that's mandated to go to a committee, so we don't have to be on the lookout for that. I suspect the city clerk or yourself going to pick that up, right? If it's mandated to go to a committee.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Right, when it's drafted, it's supposed to list what committees it is, as a matter of law, to be reviewed by, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I will say I usually gloss over that part, but now I'm going to pay more particular attention to it. Thank you.
But I'm also happy to send you.
No, I've got it now. Thank you. I will hone in on that from now on. Thank you very much.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, another question. I am looking at, I've moved ahead a little bit to R1116. We did not take that off the consent calendar, but that deals with capital improvement. This is an example. So if, and that goes to the Planning Commission, the FACT, and the Finance Committee, does not go to rules, does not go to human welfare. How do we get that to those committees after we've taken it off the consent or left it on the consent calendar?
We can.
It's done?
So the code provides for those certain titles to be assigned to certain committees automatically.
That's
At
there.
Right. In part of that provision, it was the provision I cited earlier this evening, seems like a long time ago now. It says basically, or as the city council directs to any committee. So you can always make a motion like I did, get a second, get 5 votes. And so
Have I missed the opportunity, I guess is my question.
Well, if it's already been approved on consent calendar, so that subject matter is closed, so you could do 2 things. Like I did amend the agenda in the beginning, or at the end, for the good of the order, perhaps raise the issue then.
Well,
We can just assign everything to everything.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just suggest that, certainly the Finance Committee, a lot of our colleagues take part in that process as we get into what happens over the next couple months. So, I think, unlike a lot of other issues that might go to specific committees, there'll be opportunities for everyone to be heard at that thing. But I think if you want to sort of follow the playbook of what Alderman Littman did, I'm sure it could be sent there too.
Well, I'm looking at, and Alderman Budge has convinced me to wait, but I think there should be some things that cannot go on the consent calendar. The capital improvement program should not be something we gloss over and automatically approve just because. I'm sorry, we
You're
shouldn't.
not approving the program.
No.
On first reader, but it's
I think
not
the city
going
clerk
to
can
all the
address
committees.
some of the questions that we're having right now.
Let me just say, the capital improvement program by code, it will have a public hearing. So you wouldn't have to
Okay.
pull that off to request a public hearing. The code requires that have a public hearing. And the referral to the planning commission will state that has to have a public hearing. If it goes to the planning commission, we have a public hearing on it.
Okay,
If
so
it's
that's another rule.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll see how this goes.
I think another important point to reemphasize is if you don't like anything on the consent
You can
calendar, you don't need a vote, you just need to say one person, let's take it off.
Send it to us.
So, Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Yeah.
Do we have a vote on it yet?
Yeah, you haven't voted.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. I refer to the Finance Committee and Rules and City Government Committee. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Alderman Finlayson.
I move R-1216. Oh, I'm asking for it to go to a public hearing.
Well, it hasn't been introduced yet, but.
Look, I'm following directions now. The city clerk called on me, so I thought I was supposed to say my piece. So who am I listening to now?
We're literally about to do it right now. Is there a motion to adopt R-1216 on first reading?
I move it.
Is there a second? Discussion.
Is it now I'm supposed to say, please send it to a public hearing? Is this a kangaroo court or what? I think we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Okay. All in favor of having a public, or amending it to have a public hearing, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. There'll be a public hearing. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of R-1216 on first reader, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I refer R-1216 on first reader to the Financial Advisory Commission and the Finance Committee. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is another removed consent agenda, item number 20, R-13-16, FY 2017 fees schedule effective July 1st, 2016.
Is there a motion to adopt R-13-16 on first reader?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Alderman Budge.
Yes, R-13-16 is what we're considering, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that, for the sake of the record, that is fiscal year 2017 fines, not fees.
Thank you. We will make sure we correct that. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, I would like to move that we also have a public hearing on R-13-16.
All in favor of the public All in favor of the public hearing on R 1316, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt R 1316? All right, all in favor of adopting R 1316, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, thankfully, the consent agenda and the entire agenda has been completed.
Is there anything else for the good of the order? Alderman Budge?
Yes, I note that we have a public hearing on the budget scheduled for the next council meeting, which is a week from today. Could the Director of Finance share with us when the budget will be available to the public and how? Because that gives them very little time to...
The budget in summary and then the departmental summary is being posted tonight. The entire budget, the detailed and the overview, and a few other documents will be provided to the Finance Committee tomorrow. And then from there, they'll be posted on the city's website also.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, in light of that information, I don't, because of the weird scheduling this month of meetings being changed, I mean, the Finance Committee will start its process tomorrow. We're going to come up with a series of dates to go through our process, but I'm not sure, unless there's some reason why the public hearing has to be at the next meeting, it couldn't be at the first meeting in April, to give people a little time to spin up on the budget. I would suggest that might make some more sense rather than 6 days from now, sort of turnaround for our constituents.
I agree, and I think at the next meeting we can request that it be extended.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting adjourned.